Okay, to continue 6.2 of the Savitch book, we are talking about passing the stream names as argument. So when we talked about the functions, we talked about everything has to be in functions. So the practice for last two chapters was function call, function call, function call. Now, we can do the same thing with functions, meaning that we can pass function name, stream name, into the function parameter, but it has to be called by reference all the time. So remember, call by value is going to make a copy of it. So when you have a file, generally you have a lot of data. So if it was not called by reference, it had to make a copy of this huge file, send it to the function, and then copy it back. So it would make a lot of work. So for that reason, there is no call by value for the file. It is always called by reference. So every time you have a file stream, you always going to be passing it by reference. So this is IF stream, this is OF stream, my output stream, my input stream. So that's the way we're going to do it. Now you can create functions to open your files. You can create functions to do other stuff. And then the goal is moving forward. Your main is going to be function call, function call, function call. That's the goal. I'm not saying it's going to happen all the time, but that's the goal we want to go with. We want to create functions for everything that we do. Okay. So I talked about this already in 6.1 because we needed to do some more work to be done. When we are reading using the extraction operator, that extraction operator is going to get the value, and then it's going to read. And if it's the end of the file, it's going to return false, and it's going to return true if it can read something. So it's going to read. If it can read it, it's going to return true. If it cannot read it, it's going to return false. So that's why we put this in a while loop, and then we're just going to keep reading this till the end of the file. We don't want to use for loop for the file because we don't know the size of our file. The file data can potentially change overnight. So one night we have 500 data. Next day we might have 450. Next day we might have 700. So we cannot use for loop. We're going to be using while loop. And there is another way of doing it that we talk next week with the other ones. So this is what we're going to be doing. And of course, I talked about this already. So this one that is basically practice problem 2, you're going to be setting your variable. Then you're going to have a while loop that's going to read next. I would call it number, or you can call it next, doesn't matter. It's going to read one number, and it's going to add that number to the sum, and then it's going to count it. And it's going to keep doing it till the end of the file. So if I have 500 number, my count is going to be 500. If I have 450, my count is going to be 450. And then I have my sum. At the end of this, I'm going to take the sum divided by count to get the average. So what we were doing so far, you've seen that your book is using the namespace inside the functions for the examples, especially toward the last chapter. The reason for that is if we have some other namespaces, it wouldn't conflict, and we would put it in our, let's say, input and output function. Now, the problem is going to come in that when we have our functions, when we have our function, and we want to pass IF stream and OF stream to it, it needs to know those things that is coming in from the namespace STD. So that's why we have to figure that out. One way that your book is doing is to put names using namespace STD on the top, which is something that we have been doing. But the problem with that is if we have some other ones, especially the one that has conflicting name, then we're going to have a problem. Of course, we have seen that through the, we can use STD : whenever we need namespace STD, and we can use iOS : whenever we need namespace iOS. So you've seen that already, that we're using namespace STD, and when we need the iOS, we just manually put it in. Some of you have seen this in IDEs like CLion, that even the simple C in, C out, they're using STD : C in. More typing, but that's what it is. I personally don't like to type that much, so I'm going to use using namespace STD till I find some conflict, and then I try to resolve it there. Okay, so there is a program that we can look at it on display 6.6. This program is going to takes input from a raw data. Again, all the data files are in the file folder in Canvas, and it's going to write the output to the screen to neat data. So what it does is trying to format it in a better format. It's going to have the numbers are written 1 per line in a field width of 12, and then 5 digits after decimal point, and each number is written with a plus or minus. Do you remember how do we show the numbers with the plus sign? Do you remember how to write numbers in upstream or cout with the plus sign? Okay, so this is the program. Again, we have our comments on the top explaining what is this file doing. We are putting our IO manip for the manipulators that we're going to be using in here. We are using input file and output file. So we are using ampersand called by reference. And these two, we are going to be using namespace. So that's going to be right there. We have to put comments for our functions. Some of you still is not doing it. So you've got to have comments for your function. Remember, the future uses of your functions, people are going to rely on these comments. So that's what's going to happen in the future. They don't see your code. That's all they see. So we're going to have some explanation on it. So do read this to display 6.6. So in this case, we are coming down here with F in, F out. We have been using in a stream, out the stream. Now it's going to be if in, F out, file in, file out. You can think about something else, but be sure that you have some kind of an indication that what is this doing. So we're going to be opening the raw data, and remember, every time we open, we have to check for the fail, and they have to be right after that. So I have seen some people, they open both of them and they do the fail after it. So the idea of this is what? If my raw data fails and I cannot read that file, I'm not going to even try the output. So when I'm done with the opening the file for reading, I'm going to open the file for writing. So I have seen people creating functions for this, passing in the IF stream and passing it a name, and that function is going to open the file for IF stream, or we can have it for OF stream, or we can have for both of them. We talk about that later. Okay. So remember, all the formatting is going to be part of our output. And in this file, because I have an input file and output file, the formatting goes before output file. Now, in this one, we not only want to write to a file, we want to display it on the screen. So everything that we're writing to the file, we are writing it to the screen as well. Generally, we do this for debugging purposes. So we have to decide which one we do. And generally, it's one or the other. So if I am doing this for debugging purposes, I might be just commenting it out before I send it out to the customer. So in case I need it in the future, or I might delete them. But in this case, we are going to be showing it to the screen and to the file. So the difference between these two is the stream name. In here is the neat file, which is coming in through here, through the parameter. That would be generally your out stream. And then this one is for cout. The rest of them is going to be exactly the same. So I can potentially write it as a cout and then change the couts with the neat file, and that's what's going to happen. So we have our while messy file. That's the file, the input file in the function. Remember, it doesn't have to have the same name that I have it in the main. So the function can have different name. So messy file is coming in as an input file. So that's coming in, and I'm going to use the while loop to read every number all the way through the data file. And then I'm going to do the cout, and I'm going to do the neat file. So in there, I'm going to do the set W. And instead of hard-coded number, I will have a field width coming in as a parameter. So I can have it as a global constant, or I can have it coming in as a parameter. So you can see that in here, when I call this make neat f in, f out, I have 5 for my field for number after decimal point, and I have 12 for my field width. We do it this way so we can have different numbers for different things. Remember, the functions should be generic enough to move it anywhere we want. So we give the option to the future developer that they can call the same thing with different numbers. So we can do it through global constant, or we can pass it as a parameter. So this was the original one that we used. And this is what's going to happen on the screen. And this is what's going to happen in our file. You can see it's write justified. Our numbers are automatically write justified. We have 12 spaces from here to here. So from here to here is 12 spaces, 12 placeholders. Same thing goes with my screen. And then I have 5 decimal points. So that's the way it's going to happen. Okay, so that was for the programs and so that's the program we looked at. And now this is the conclusion for this section. Take a look at this and see how much of this you can do. And if you have any questions, let me know through the DQ or bring it to the class so we can discuss. Okay, so that's going to end 6.2 for us.